The rock above my head cracked, and dust rained down into the nursery cave as the mountain shook for the third time in a minute. I was pinned between two boulders with no clear path to the exit, and somewhere in the dark behind me, a newborn dragon was screaming. I had not planned to be here. I had come up the mountain only to fix a broken relay tower before the storm hit, but the storm had come early, and the whole ridge was folding in on itself under black lightning. The nursery cave was the nearest shelter, and I had barely stepped inside when the first tremor threw me off my feet. 6 eggs sat in a nest of warm ash at the back of the cave. 5 had already hatched, and their mother, a huge dragon named Vesa, curled around them like a wall of dark scales, shielding them from falling stone. She turned her head toward me, eyes narrowing, and even through the noise of the collapsing ceiling, I understood the warning in that look. She did not want me anywhere near her children. I raised both hands and started backing toward the entrance, but the 6th egg chose that exact moment to crack open. It was the smallest of the clutch, and it had been ignored for days because the healers said it was too weak to survive. Now it broke apart in the middle of a cave-in, and a thin, shaking hatchling spilled out onto the cold stone, blind and alone, while her mother's whole body was turned the other way, protecting the 5 that were already strong. Nobody moved to help her. Vesa could not reach her without exposing the others to the falling rock, and the healers were trapped on the far side of a boulder that had sealed off half the cave. The hatchling let out a high, broken cry that cut straight through the noise of the storm, and something in me moved before I could think about it. I ran across open ground while the ceiling kept crumbling, scooped the shaking little creature into my jacket, and threw myself against the cave wall, just as a slab of rock crashed down exactly where I had been standing. My ears rang. Dust filled my lungs. But the hatchling was alive, pressed against my chest, and slowly, her frantic cries began to quiet as she felt my heartbeat through the fabric. Vesa's roar shook what was left of the ceiling. She thought I had taken her daughter. She had every reason to think that, because for years she had told anyone who would listen that humans could not be trusted, that we had come to her world only to take what we wanted and leave the wreckage behind. Now here I was, a stranger from that same untrustworthy species, holding her weakest child in the middle of a collapsing cave. I did not run. There was nowhere to run to, and even if there had been, I would not have left the hatchling shaking against my chest. I turned so my back faced the falling rock, and my body shielded her instead, and I shouted over the noise that I was not taking her anywhere, that I only wanted to keep her alive until the storm passed. Vesa did not attack. She could not without risking the 5 hatchlings still under her wings, and some instinct in her seemed to understand that I was not a threat, only an obstacle, in the wrong place at the wrong time. For the longest 30 seconds of my life, we stared at each other across a cave full of falling stone, a mother torn between fury and fear, and a stranger who had no idea what he had just started. Then the tremors stopped. The storm outside began to weaken, and rescue teams from the lower village reached the entrance within the hour, clearing the boulders and pulling survivors out into the gray morning light. I handed the hatchling to the first healer I saw, relieved to be free of the responsibility, certain that this strange night was over. It was not over. It had only begun. By evening, the hatchling would not eat. She would not sleep. She screamed every time anyone but me came near her, and calmed the moment I walked back into the room. The healers exchanged worried looks, and an old dragon named Orin, one of the clan elders, arrived to examine her with an expression I did not like at all. He told me what imprinting meant. Dragon hatchlings bond once, in the first hours of life, to whoever shelters them from danger, and that bond is permanent. It is not a choice either side makes on purpose. It simply happens, wired into a hatchling's mind before she even opens her eyes, and once it happens, it cannot be undone without breaking something in her that never heals. She had bonded to me, not to her mother, not to her own kind. To a human, she had felt through a jacket for less than a minute in the middle of a cave-in. Vessa's fury returned the moment she heard the news, and this time there was no falling rock to hold her back. She stood over me in the healing hall, wings spread wide enough to blot out the light, and told me that I had stolen the one thing she could never forgive losing. I tried to explain that I had not meant to take anything, that I had only reacted the way anyone would when a baby was in danger, but grief does not listen to reason, and neither did she. Oren stepped between us before things went further. He explained that there was an old ritual that could sever an imprint bond, used only a handful of times in the clan's long history. It would let the hatchling live free of her attachment to me, but it would also leave a permanent emptiness in her, a coldness that no warmth would ever fully reach again. The choice belonged to Vessa, as her mother, and she had 3 days to decide. Those 3 days were the hardest of my life. I stayed near the healing hall because the hatchling, who the healers had started calling Wren for the soft chirping sound she made, would not settle unless I was close. I learned how to feed her, how to keep her warm through the cold mountain nights, how to hold her wings steady while they finished growing in. Vessa watched every moment of it from a distance, arms crossed, saying nothing, her eyes sharp with a pain I was slowly beginning to understand. On the second night, a second storm rolled in, faster and angrier than the first, and this one brought something worse than falling rock. A pack of ridge wolves, driven down from the higher peaks by the weather, found their way into the lower caves where the healing hall stood. I heard the healers shouting before I understood what was happening, and then Wren was screaming again, the same terrified cry from the night she hatched. I grabbed her without thinking, and backed into the deepest corner of the room, putting myself between her and the entrance, just as the first wolf appeared in the doorway. It was larger than any wolf I had ever seen, with pale eyes that caught the torchlight, and it was clearly hunting, drawn by the sound and smell of something small and helpless. I had no weapon. I had only my body, and whatever courage I could find in that moment, and I used both, shouting and throwing anything within reach to keep the animal back, while healers scrambled to bar the door with heavy furniture. It felt like the longest minute of my life, my arms shaking from holding Wren so tightly, my voice raw from shouting, until finally the door held and the wolves gave up, drawn away by easier prey somewhere else on the mountain. When it was over, I looked up and found Vessa standing in the hallway, having flown straight through the storm the moment she heard the commotion. She had seen enough of it to understand exactly what I had done, throwing myself in front of danger for a child that was not mine by blood, without a single moment of hesitation. She did not say anything that night. She simply sat down outside the healing hall and stayed there until morning, close enough to hear if her daughter cried again, but far enough to leave me the space I needed to calm her down. On the morning of the third day, when the elders gathered to hear her decision about the ritual, Vessa stood in front of the whole clan and said she would not break the bond. She said that she had spent years telling her people that humans could not be trusted with anything that mattered, and then she had watched one stand between her daughter and a falling mountain, and again between her daughter and a pack of wolves, without asking for anything in return. She did not say she trusted me completely. She was honest enough to admit that old wounds do not close in 3 days, and that years of harm done by other humans could not be erased by one act of courage. But she said she trusted her daughter's instincts, and her daughter had chosen me before she even knew what trust meant. From that day on, I was not just the human liaison sent to manage relations with her clan. I was Wren's father in every sense that mattered to her people, and slowly, carefully, I became something to Vessa too, not quite family yet, but no longer a stranger to fear. Wren grew fast, the way dragon hatchlings do, and within a season, she was already testing her wings on short flights across the ridge, always circling back to land near me, no matter how far she wandered. Vessa flew beside her more often than not, teaching her how to hunt, how to read the weather, how to survive on a mountain that did not forgive mistakes. I never forgot that first night. The screaming in the dark, the rock falling around us, the moment I chose to run toward danger instead of away from it. I did not do it because I was brave. I did it because there was no other choice that felt like a choice at all. Sometimes the smallest decisions, made in the middle of chaos with no time to think, end up shaping everything that follows. A collapsing cave brought a mother's worst fear and a stranger's first act of courage together in the same terrible night, and out of that night came something neither of us expected. A bond strong enough to change the way an entire clan looked at the people from the sky.